Confusion at the southern border as many illegal Haitians reportedly being released into the United States. That's as Texas Governor Greg Abbott is again asking President Biden to declare a federal emergency for his state. The CDC is now requiring measles vaccines for Afghan refugees recently brought to the U.S. That's after authorities found several cases of measles, tuberculosis, and malaria among them. And we hear from former counterterrorism officer Drew Berquist about the situation in Afghanistan going forward. Tune into Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Let's begin with the southern border. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is again asking President Biden to declare a federal emergency for his state. The governor told reporters at the border there is a need for a presidential disaster declaration over the illegal immigration crisis. He has not heard back from Biden yet. Abbott says U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents are overwhelmed by the chaos of thousands of migrants who are now camped out at the U.S.-Mexico border.
These Border Patrol officers are overwhelmed with the amount of work they are required to do, and they're suffering the consequences of an administration that is not providing them either the personnel or the resources they need.
Now, as to the crisis in Del Rio, Texas, many Haitians are reportedly being released into the United States instead of being sent back to Haiti. That's according to an Associated Press report, citing unnamed U.S. officials. It undercuts the administration's public statements.
If you come to the United States illegally, you will be returned.
One unnamed official said large numbers of Haitians are being processed under immigration laws and not being placed on expulsion flights to Haiti. He estimates the number in the thousands. The official adds that Homeland Security has been busing Haitians from Del Rio to El Paso, Laredo, and the Rio Grande Valley along the Texas border. They're also adding flights this week to Tucson, Arizona. Once there, Border Patrol processes them. Many of these Haitians are released with notices to appear at an immigration office within 60 days. That takes less processing by Border Patrol agents than ordering an appearance in immigration court. The number of illegal immigrants, primarily from Haiti, increased last week, topping 14,000 at one point. The quick jump sparked the deployment of over 600 agents and officers and repatriation flights to Haiti. U.S. officials have since moved over 6,500 from Del Rio to other parts of the border in an attempt to alleviate pressure. And a Homeland Security spokesman told the Epoch Times around 1,000 have been deported back to Haiti on 9 flights through September 21st. Others are being released into the interior. How many is unclear because officials aren't saying. Another source told AP that officials are planning several daily flights back to Haiti starting today. Now, as to those who are flown out of the country, a chaotic scene unfolded at the airport in Port-au-Prince on Tuesday as migrants arrived back in the country from the United States. On the ground, anger and frustration as the immigrants arrived back in Haiti. Some say they did not even know their destination when they boarded the plane. A journalist who witnessed the arrival described a, quote, lack of coordination on the ground, stating that immigrants were left to themselves once they landed. No U.S. presence other than the aircraft was seen on the ground. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security acknowledged what they called disruptions on the tarmac in Port-au-Prince, stating that Haitian crowd control officers resolved the situation. This comes as Homeland Security head Alejandro Mayorkas testifies before the Homeland Security Committee today. Thousands of migrants are living at a temporary site under the Del Rio International Bridge in Texas as they wait to be processed by U.S. immigration authorities. Some 8,600 migrants, many of whom are from Haiti, are estimated to remain at the Del Rio Bridge. Mayorkas has said the Biden administration hopes to clear out the camp within the next 10 days. The border crisis could be costly for Biden and Democrats. Republicans point to dozens of Biden's executive orders, including an attempt to overturn the Remain in Mexico policy.
We were serious about border security until your administration took office.
Senator Josh Hawley criticizing the Secretary of Homeland Security, saying every time he comes before their committee, he says things will get better.
Every time you leave, it gets worse and worse. This is a humanitarian crisis in Del Rio. Tens of thousands of people living in conditions that are startling, brought here because of your policies.
Texas Democrat Henry Cuellar says over 1.5 million people have come in so far this year alone.
I represent border communities. We can not only represent immigration activists, we also have to keep in mind the border communities, the pressure the frustration that's down there when you have thousands of people that come in at the same time.
Cuellar says he thinks people should follow the law, and if they aren't supposed to be there, they should be deported. Now, let's turn to a different area of immigration, the Afghan refugees recently brought to the U.S. The CDC is now requiring measles vaccines for them. That's after authorities found several cases of measles, tuberculosis, and malaria among them. The CDC said on Monday there have been 16 cases of measles and 4 cases of mumps among the evacuees. All of the measles patients have been in isolation, and their contacts have also been quarantined. The U.S. evacuated around 124,000 people from Afghanistan last month. The CDC now requires every one of them to get the measles, mumps, and rubella or MMR vaccine, and they must also quarantine for 21 days after getting the shot. The CDC is also aware of some cases of chickenpox, tuberculosis, malaria, leishmaniasis, hepatitis A, and COVID-19 among the evacuees. The CDC wants evacuees who are currently in third countries to get the shots and complete the quarantine before they enter the U.S. The U.S. has temporarily halted flying them into the country for this reason. Measles is an extremely contagious disease. It can infect around 9 out of every 10 people coming into contact with the virus. It was declared eliminated from the U.S. in 2000, but the CDC expects more cases to spread among the evacuees. That's because only 60% of the people in Afghanistan are vaccinated against the disease, and the country ranks 7th in the world for measles cases. Although not mandatory, the CDC also recommends evacuees to be vaccinated against chickenpox, polio, COVID-19, and the seasonal flu. And as to the Afghan refugees getting a new start in a new country, 33 major U.S. companies are stepping up to help. They have joined Tent Partnership for Refugees, an organization founded by Chobani CEO Hamdi Ulukaya. Amazon, Facebook, Pfizer, Tyson Foods, Uber, and UPS are among the companies that have promised to hire and train Afghans settling in the U.S. Amazon has said it would hire refugees in its warehouses and transportation centers, with a starting wage of more than $18 an hour. It will also pay for training and education programs. Now, what about those who didn't make it to America? We spoke with Drew Berquist, former counterterrorism officer. He's been on over 30 deployments to Afghanistan amid the war on terror. Hello, Drew. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
So with the end of the war on terror, aside from Americans, there are also foreign interpreters and allies still in Afghanistan. Going forward, what can the U.S. and allies do to combat that?
Well, again, it's going to be difficult if we don't pivot back and have any form of presence there. Again, you kind of go dark. You lose a lot of visibility, and when you lose that, and you lose the ability to say, "Hey, we've got this intel, we've got this information, we're able to conduct this operation and get rid of this Al Qaeda cell here or what have you," you lose a lot of leverage. And then just the way that we've handled this altogether, we've given away a lot of leverage. So how we're going to kind of recapture that? Some of our partners are very frustrated with us, very confused by how we've handled this process. So how we capture that and how we actually execute it is really a great question. There's certainly ways we could do it, but I don't think that this Biden administration and the appetite is there within the Pentagon to go in and fix things and do that. So I think it's going to be lots of diplomatic talk, lots of stuff that's not going to make much change. And it's, again, going to allow the Taliban, allow Al Qaeda, allow all the other extremist groups there to be further and further emboldened, better and better armed, equipped, trained, and ready to wreak havoc across the region and hopefully not, but possibly the world.
And from a civilian point of view, is there anything the average Joe can do to try and help?
Well, it's every time we get a really good plan in place, it gets squashed either by our government or by the Russians trying to block things in Tajikistan or someone getting involved in Uzbekistan to stop things. So there are different groups out there. I wouldn't point to anyone right now to pass money or support to, just because one, that's not my exact wheelhouse, but two, these plans do keep changing. We've got some things that we're working on right now to try and help and formulate this new plan that hopefully is going to work. But again, we don't know because everything is changing so rapidly on the ground. So I would say stand by, keep praying for these people and their safety and be ready to give as new and improved platforms come out and methods where we can get them out, because certainly a lot of them deserve it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And that was Drew Berquist, former counterterrorism officer, and he also hosts his own show. And now before we end, summer is over and fall is here. Today is the fall equinox. That's a day when every place on Earth gets roughly 12 hours of sunlight and 12 hours of darkness. In other words, it's the astronomical start of autumn. Some people think summer ends with Labor Day, and they have a point too. Meteorologists have their own calendar for the seasons, and it says fall started weeks ago. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.